The year was 2187, and humanity believed it was alone in the universe. For nearly 200 years, humans had spread across the stars. They built colonies on distant worlds. They raised families under alien suns. They looked up at the night sky and felt proud of how far they had come. They did not know that something old and terrible was watching them from the darkness between the stars. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Ironclad. He was a tall man with gray eyes and a calm voice. He had served in the fleet for 20 years and had never fired a weapon in anger. Space was peaceful. Space was safe. That was what everyone believed. The Ironclad was stationed above New Geneva, one of humanity's most beautiful colony worlds. 30 million people lived there. They had parks and schools and hospitals. Children played in the streets. Families ate dinner together. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Then the sky tore open. Jack saw it happen on his sensors first. A ripple in space, like a stone dropped into still water. Then another. Then 100 more. Ships began to appear from nothing. They were enormous, black, and covered in strange symbols that hurt the eyes to look at. They moved with terrible purpose. "What is that?" whispered Lieutenant Amy Chen, her face pale with fear. Jack did not answer. He could not answer. In all of human history, they had never seen anything like this. Alien ships. Real alien ships. And there were so many of them. The aliens did not try to communicate. They did not send messages of peace or demands for surrender. They simply opened fire. The first plasma beam hit New Geneva's capital city. One moment, 3 million people were going about their lives. The next moment, there was only a crater of molten glass where the city had stood. The beam was so bright that Jack had to look away. When he looked back, the city was gone. "No," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. No, no, no. More beams fell. City after city vanished in fire and light. The Ironclad tried to fight back, but their weapons did nothing against the alien shields. Jack watched helplessly as the planet burned. He heard the screams coming through the communication channels. He heard mothers crying for their children. He heard fathers begging for mercy. And then he heard nothing at all. In 6 hours, New Geneva was dead. 30 million people gone. And that was only the beginning. Across human space, the same scene played out again and again. The aliens, who would later be called the Vexery, struck 12 colonies simultaneously. They moved with perfect coordination. They showed no mercy. They killed everyone they could find. On Titan Station, a research facility orbiting Saturn's largest moon, Dr. Linda Reyes was working late in her laboratory. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied the possibility of alien life. She had spent 20 years searching for evidence that humanity was not alone. Now that evidence had found humanity first, the attack came without warning. Linda heard explosions in the distance. She heard people screaming. She grabbed her computer and started downloading everything she could. The alien ships were broadcasting signals, and her equipment was picking them up. She did not know what the signals meant, but she knew they might be important. Her husband called her on the emergency channel. His name was Carlos, and he was in the habitat section with their 2 children, Alina and Marco. The children were only 7 and 9 years old. "Linda, where are you?" Carlos shouted. She could hear terror in his voice. "They're breaking through the walls. They're coming in." "Linda, I can see them. They're not human." There, the channel went dead. Linda ran. She ran through corridors filled with smoke and fire. She ran past bodies of people she had known for years. She ran until she reached the emergency transport bay. A small ship was leaving, packed with survivors. Someone grabbed her arm and pulled her aboard just as the doors closed. Through the transport window, Linda watched Titan Station die. She watched it break apart and burn. She thought about Carlos holding Alina and Marco close, trying to protect them from something he could not stop. She thought about their faces, their voices, their laughter. She would never see them again. She would never hear them again. Something inside Linda changed in that moment. The woman who had spent her life hoping to meet alien intelligence died with her family. In her place was someone cold and patient and filled with a terrible purpose. At Earth Command, Admiral Nathan Cole received the reports as they came in. Each one was worse than the last. New Geneva, destroyed. Titan Station, destroyed. Proxima Colony, destroyed. The names kept coming. 12 worlds. 12 massacres. Billions of human beings wiped from existence in a single day. Nathan was 60 years old. He had grandchildren on Earth. He had believed that his generation would be the one to finally bring lasting peace to humanity. He had been wrong. The aliens finally sent a message. It came in perfect English, translated by technology that humanity could not understand. The message was simple. You are the species called humans. You are young and weak and unworthy of the stars. We are the Vexery Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We have destroyed 100 species before you. You will be the 101st. We will kill you slowly. We will hunt every one of you. We will burn every world you touch. When we are finished, no one will remember that you ever existed. Nathan read the message 3 times. His hands were shaking. Around him, his staff was crying or praying or staring at nothing. Some had family on the colonies that had burned. Some were simply overwhelmed by the horror of it all. Nathan thought about his grandchildren. He thought about the children of New Geneva, dying in fire they did not understand. He thought about the Vexery, sitting in their ships, expecting humanity to simply give up and wait for death. And then something changed in Nathan, too. The fear did not go away, but something stronger rose up beside it. Something hard and sharp and unyielding. He stood up and looked at his staff. His voice did not shake when he spoke. They killed 12 worlds, he said. They murdered our families, our children, our future. And they expect us to simply lie down and die. He paused. The room was silent. They have made a mistake. They think we are like the others they have destroyed. They think we will accept extinction. They are wrong. They have awakened something in humanity that should have stayed sleeping, and we will make them regret it. Nathan looked up at the stars through the command center window. Somewhere out there, the Vexery were celebrating their easy victory. Somewhere out there, they were laughing at the weak little species they had crushed. They would not be laughing for long. Send out the call, Nathan ordered. Every ship, every soldier, every scientist, everyone. Tell them what happened. Tell them who did this. And tell them we are going to war. The message went out across human space. It reached survivors hiding in asteroid fields. It reached soldiers on distant outposts. It reached scientists and engineers and ordinary people who had never held a weapon in their lives. And everywhere the message reached, the response was the same. Not fear, not despair, but anger. Cold, patient, terrible anger. The Vexery had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about their place in the universe. Humanity was about to teach them one instead. 6 months passed after the massacre. The Vexery watched from their distant empire and waited. They expected to see a broken species. They expected to see humans fighting among themselves, falling into chaos, making the final conquest easy. They had seen this happen 100 times before with other species. Fear and despair always destroyed their victims from within. But when they looked at human space, they did not see what they expected. They saw something that confused them. They saw factories running day and night. They saw shipyards working at impossible speeds. They saw a species that was not falling apart, but coming together. The Vexery had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed humans were like everyone else they had conquered. They were wrong. Captain Derek Santos led the first reconnaissance mission into Vexery space. He was 32 years old with dark hair and steady hands. Before the massacre, he had been a cargo pilot, moving supplies between colonies. Now he commanded a small stealth ship called the Shadow Walker. And a crew of 50 volunteers. Every person on the ship knew they would probably die. They went anyway. Some had lost families in the attacks. Some simply could not stand waiting while others risked their lives. They all understood that someone had to learn about the enemy before humanity could fight back. The journey took 3 weeks. They moved carefully, hiding behind asteroids and moons, avoiding Vexery patrols. When they finally reached Vexery space, what they found surprised them. The Vexery Empire was vast. It stretched across thousands of star systems. They had conquered over 100 different species, enslaving some and destroying others. Their technology was advanced, their ships were powerful, and their history stretched back 10,000 years. But Derek noticed something else. The Vexery were spread thin. Their fleets were scattered across their enormous empire, keeping conquered worlds under control. They had never faced a real threat because no species had ever fought back effectively. Their military was designed for easy conquest, not hard war. "They're not prepared for us," Derek told his crew. "They've never had to be. Everyone they've ever fought has just given up." He sent his findings back to Earth through a coded message drone. Then he continued deeper into enemy territory, learning everything he could. On Earth, Dr. Linda Reyes worked in a secret laboratory buried deep underground. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since Titan Station. She did not need sleep. She had something more powerful than rest driving her forward. She had purpose. The data she had captured during the attack contained fragments of Vexery communication signals. She studied them for months, slowly learning the patterns of their language, structure of their technology, the nature of their biology. The Vexery were not like humans. They did not have brains like humans. Instead, their thoughts ran through complex neural networks, spread throughout their bodies. These networks were fast and powerful. But Linda discovered they had a weakness. A specific frequency of radiation could disrupt those networks. It would not hurt humans or most other species. But to a Vexery, it would be like having their entire nervous system set on fire. Instant death. Painless for the attacker. Agonizing for the victim. Linda brought her discovery to General Maria Vance, the woman in charge of humanity's new war effort. Maria was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had lost her son on New Geneva. She understood Linda's cold determination because she shared it. "How many can this weapon kill?" Maria asked, looking at the technical specifications. "It depends on the power source," Linda replied. "A small device could kill a single Vexery. A large device, powered by a ship's reactor, could kill every Vexery in an entire star system. Millions of them. Instantly." Maria was silent for a long moment. Millions of deaths caused by a single button press. It was a terrible thing to contemplate. But then she thought about the children of New Geneva, dying in fire, and her heart hardened. "Build it," she ordered. Across Earth and the surviving colonies, humanity transformed itself. Every factory was converted to military production. Every scientist was put to work on weapons research. Every able-bodied adult was trained for war. Young engineer Sam Porter worked in a secret shipyard hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. He was only 25 years old, but he had been a genius even before the war. Now his genius had a focus. Sam had lost his entire family on New Geneva. His parents, his sister, his nieces and nephews. Everyone he loved had died in alien fire. He channeled his grief into his work, designing a new class of warship unlike anything humanity had built before. The ship was called the Reckoning class. It was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was a weapon of pure destruction, designed for one purpose only. Every system was built around overwhelming firepower. Every design choice was made to maximize the damage it could inflict on the enemy. "It's brutal," Sam told Admiral Nathan Cole when he presented the design. "It's not meant to explore or defend. It's meant to kill Vexery. Nothing else." Nathan looked at the specifications. The ships would be expensive to build and difficult to maintain. They would burn through fuel and ammunition at incredible rates. They were not practical for anything except war. "Build as many as you can," Nathan ordered. The first Reckoning-class ship was completed in 4 months. Then another. Then another. Hidden shipyards across human space worked around the clock. Workers collapsed from exhaustion and were replaced by fresh volunteers. No one complained. No one asked for rest. Everyone understood what was at stake. Commander Jack Morrison, who had witnessed the destruction of New Geneva from the bridge of the Ironclad, was given command of the new First Vengeance fleet. It was a name that told the Vexerie exactly what was coming. Jack spent months training his crews. He studied every piece of data from the colony attacks. He learned Vexerie tactics and found their weaknesses. He ran simulations again and again until his people could fight in their sleep. The Vexerie are used to easy victories, he told his officers. They've never fought anyone who truly wanted to win. That's going to change. When we meet them, they're going to face something they've never seen before. They're going to face humans who are ready to die if it means taking the enemy with them. The officers nodded. They understood. They had all lost someone in the massacre. They were all ready to pay any price for revenge. Back at Earth Command, Admiral Nathan Cole watched the preparations unfold. Ships, weapons, soldiers, everything was coming together faster than anyone had thought possible. Humanity had never been united like this before. All the old conflicts and divisions had vanished in the fire of the Vexerie attack. They tried to break us, Nathan said to General Vance. Instead, they made us stronger than we've ever been. Maria nodded. The Vexerie don't understand us. They think all species are the same. They think everyone gives up when faced with overwhelming force. They've never met a species that gets angry instead of afraid. Nathan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They're about to learn. In deep space, Derek Santos and his crew completed their reconnaissance mission. They had mapped Vexerie patrol routes, identified weak points in their defenses, and gathered intelligence on their military structure. They lost 12 crew members along the way. Good people who died so others could learn. Derek sent his final report to Earth and turned his ship toward home. He did not know if he would survive the journey back. He did not care. He had done his job. Now, it was time for others to do theirs. The stage was set. The weapons were built. The fleets were ready. Humanity was coming for the Vexerie, and they were bringing hell with them. The Vexerie? Patrol fleet arrived at the Kepler system on what they expected to be an easy mission. Intelligence reports said there were human refugees hiding in the asteroid fields. The fleet commander, whose name translated roughly to "he who brings silence," looked forward to the hunt. Killing fleeing prey was always satisfying. The fleet consisted of 12 warships, each one capable of destroying a human city with a single shot. They had enough firepower to burn a small moon. Against terrified refugees with no military ships, it would be more of an execution than a battle. He who brings silence ordered his ships to spread out and begin scanning for human life signs. His crew worked efficiently, following procedures they had used 1,000 times before. Find the prey. Surround the prey. Kill the prey, simple. The first sign of trouble came when one of his ships stopped responding. Then another. Then a third. He who brings silence stared at his tactical display, confused. His ships were vanishing from sensors one by one, but he could not see any enemy vessels. Then space around him exploded with light. Commander. Jack Morrison watched from the bridge of his new ship. The Fury of Earth. He had positioned his fleet perfectly, hiding behind asteroids and using sensor-blocking technology to stay invisible. The Vexerie had flown right into his trap without suspecting a thing. All ships, fire at will, Jack ordered calmly. The First Vengeance fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, missile barrages, rail guns, all of it concentrated on the surprised Vexerie ships. The new human weapons were designed specifically to penetrate Vexerie shields. Engineer Sam Porter had spent months analyzing captured alien technology, finding the exact frequencies that would punch through their defenses. The Vexerie shields flickered and failed. Their hull armor, which had seemed invincible during the colony attacks, crumpled under the focused assault. Ships that had burned human cities were torn apart in seconds. He who brings silence screamed orders at his crew. But it was already too late. His flagship was surrounded, taking fire from 3 directions. Warning lights flashed across every console. hull breaches, engine failures, weapons offline. How? He demanded. They are primitives. They cannot do this. Those were his last words. A human missile struck his command deck and turned it into fire and twisted metal. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, not a single Vexery ship remained. 12 warships, thousands of alien soldiers, all destroyed. For the first time in 10,000 years, a Vexery fleet had been completely wiped out. Jack stood on his bridge and looked at the wreckage floating in space. He felt no joy. He felt no satisfaction. He only thought about New Geneva, about the billions who had died, about the justice that had finally begun. Record everything, he ordered his communications officer. Every angle, every detail. I want the Vexery to see exactly what happened here. The recording was broadcast across every frequency humanity could reach into Vexery space. It showed the battle from start to finish. It showed Vexery ships burning. It showed their fleet commander's final moments. And at the end, it showed Jack Morrison looking directly into the camera. This is for the 12 colonies, he said. This is for the billions you murdered. We are coming for you, all of you, and we will not stop until the debt is paid. The message spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. It reached Vexery command stations and threw them into confusion. It reached enslaved worlds and planted seeds of hope. It reached species who had watched humanity's massacre and assumed they would simply die like all the others. On the planet called Nexer Prime, a world the Vexery had conquered 300 years ago, a young Nexari named Keth watched the recording with wide eyes. The Nexari were a gentle species, small and fragile compared to their Vexery masters. They had been slaves for generations. They had forgotten what freedom felt like, but as Keth watched the human ships tear through Vexery defenses, something stirred in his chest. Something he had never felt before. Something like hope. They won, he whispered to his sister. The new species won against the masters. His sister looked afraid. Do not speak of such things. If the masters hear, the masters can be beaten, Keth said. Look, the humans proved it. If they can win, maybe others can too. All across the Vexery Empire, similar conversations were happening. The Talvone, the Shrell, the Gorvan, species that had suffered under alien rule for centuries, all saw the recording. All began to wonder if resistance was possible. At Earth Command, Admiral Nathan Cole received reports of the victory with quiet satisfaction. He had hoped the new weapons would work. He had hoped the new tactics would succeed. But hoping and knowing were different things. Now he knew. How did the Vexery respond? He asked his intelligence officer. Confusion, mostly, the officer replied. Their communications are chaotic. They're trying to figure out what happened. I don't think they believed it was possible. Athe nodded. Good. Their confusion is our advantage. We need to strike again before they recover. Where is the next target? General Maria Vance pulled up a star map. Captain Santos identified several Vexery supply stations during his reconnaissance. If we hit them simultaneously, we can cripple their ability to resupply their fleets for months. Do it, Nathan ordered. The second wave of attacks hit 3 days later. This time, humanity struck at 5 targets at once. Supply stations burned. Fuel depots exploded. Repair facilities were reduced to debris. Each attack was quick and brutal, with human ships appearing from nowhere, destroying everything. And vanishing before reinforcements could arrive, the Vexery High Council met in emergency session on their homeworld. They had not gathered like this in centuries. They had never needed to. Their empire had always run smoothly, their conquests had always succeeded, their power had always been absolute. Now they faced something unprecedented. A prey species that fought back. A primitive race that was winning battles. How is this possible? Demanded the eldest council member. These humans have only been in space for 200 of their years. We have ruled for 10,000. How can they defeat our fleets? No one had an answer. We must crush them completely, another council member suggested. Send the Grand Fleet. Burn their homeworld. End this, before it spreads. But reports were already coming in from across the Empire. The enslaved species were growing restless. There had been riots on Nexar Prime, sabotage on Talvoni Station, whispers of rebellion everywhere. The Vexari military was stretched thin, trying to maintain control while also fighting the human threat. The empire that had seemed eternal was beginning to crack. Back at Earth, Dr. Linda Reyes completed the final tests on her neural disruption weapon. It was ready for deployment. She held the activation device in her hands, a small box that could kill millions of Vexari with a single press. "When do we use it?" she asked General Vance. Maria replied, "We're planning the main offensive now. When we strike the Vexari homeworld, your weapon will be our secret advantage." Linda looked at the device. She thought about Carlos Alina. And Marco? She thought about the way they died, frightened and confused. Killed by aliens who saw them as nothing more than insects to be crushed. "I want to be there," she said. "I want to see it happen." Maria studied Linda's face. She saw the cold determination there, the absolute commitment to vengeance. She understood it because she felt it herself. "You'll be there," Maria promised. "We all will." The preparations for the final offensive began. Ships gathered. Weapons were loaded. Soldiers said goodbye to their families. Knowing they might never return, humanity was about to take the war to the Vexari homeworld, and nothing would ever be the same again. The human counteroffensive began on the one-year anniversary of the massacre. Admiral Nathan Cole chose the date deliberately. He wanted the Vexari to understand that humanity remembered. He wanted them to know that every year, on this day, they would think about what they had done and what it had cost them. 12 fleets launched simultaneously from hidden spaces across human space. One fleet for each colony that had burned. Each fleet had a specific target, a specific mission, and a specific purpose. Together, they formed the largest military operation in human history. Captain Derek Santos led the assault on Vexar Prime, the Vexar homeworld. His ship, the Unforgiving, was a reckoning-class destroyer. Bristling with weapons and armored against anything the enemy could throw at it. Behind him came 300 more ships, carrying 50,000 soldiers and enough firepower to crack a planet. Derek stood on his bridge and watched. The stars blur as his fleet entered fold space. He thought about his reconnaissance mission, the friends he had lost, the intelligence he had gathered. All of it had led to this moment. "Final systems check," he ordered. "I want every weapon hot and every shield at maximum when we emerge." His crew responded with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this. They were ready. The fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of the Vexar system. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Derek saw the Vexari homeworld on his sensors, a large planet orbiting a yellow star. Cities covered its surface. Billions of Vexari lived there, going about their daily lives, believing they were safe. They were not safe. "All ships," Derek commanded, "begin attack run." The human fleet surged forward. Vexari defense platforms opened fire, but they were designed to repel small raiding parties, not full invasion forces. Human ships absorbed the damage and kept coming. Missiles streaked across space, turning the platforms into expanding clouds of debris. The Vexari home fleet scrambled to respond. But they were caught off guard. They had never expected an attack on their homeworld. They had never imagined that anyone would dare. Ships launched in disorganized waves, flying directly into human weapons fire. On the science vessel Memoria, which hung at the edge of the battle, Dr. Linda Reyes waited. She had been given a special mission. When the time was right, she would activate her neural disruption weapon and kill every Vexari within its range. Millions of them. In an instant, she watched the battle through her viewport, seeing Vexari ships burn and human ships advance. She felt nothing. She had stopped feeling anything months ago. There was only the mission, only the revenge. "The fleet has cleared the outer defenses," her captain reported. "We are moving into position." Linda nodded and placed her hand on the activation device. It was warm to the touch, humming with the power that would soon end millions of lives. She thought about Carlos and the children. She thought about their final moments, trapped and afraid. She thought about the Vexery who had killed them, who had not cared, who had seen her family as nothing more than obstacles to be removed. "Ready on your command, Doctor," the captain said. Linda waited. The Memoria moved closer to the planet, positioning itself for maximum effect. The neural disruption field would spread across the northern hemisphere, killing every Vexery in its path. Military installations, government buildings, civilian centers, none of it would matter. Everyone would die, now she said, and pressed the button. The weapon activated with a low hum that Linda felt more than heard. A wave of invisible energy spread outward from the Memoria, passing through shields and walls and armor as if they were not there. It touched the Vexery and burned their neural networks from the inside out. On Vexer Prime, millions of Vexery collapsed simultaneously. They died in the streets, in their homes, in their military bases. Commanders fell at their posts. Children fell in their schools. The old and the young, the warriors and the civilians. All of them died in the same instant. Their nervous systems overloading in a flash of agony. Linda watched through enhanced sensors as the life signs on the planet's surface blinked out one by one, then in groups, then in thousands, then in millions. She kept her hand on the activation device, holding it steady, making sure the field remained active. Neural activity dropping across the northern hemisphere, her science officer reported. 90% reduction. 95. 98. Complete. It was done. Millions of Vexery, dead in minutes. The weapon had worked perfectly. Linda released the device and sat back in her chair. She had expected to feel something. Triumph, maybe? Relief? Or horror at what she had done. But there was nothing. Only emptiness. Only the knowledge that her family was still gone, and nothing would bring them back. The battle for Vexer Prime continued for 2 more days, but the outcome was never in doubt. With millions of their people dead and their defenses shattered, the remaining Vexery forces were quickly overwhelmed. Human soldiers landed on the planet's surface, securing key locations and capturing survivors. Across the galaxy, the other 11 fleets achieved similar victories. Vexery military bases fell. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were destroyed. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years was being torn apart in days. But humanity was not alone in this fight. On a dozen worlds, enslaved species saw our chance and took it. The Nexari rose up against their masters, using weapons that human smugglers had provided. The Talvoni sabotaged Vexery ships from within. The Shrell attacked supply convoys with improvised explosives. The Gorvin, a species the Vexery had nearly exterminated, came out of hiding and joined the assault. Keth, the young Nexari who had watched the first human victory, led a group of rebels against the Vexery garrison on his world. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they did not care. They had lived as slaves for too long. Death was preferable to another day in chains. For freedom, Keth shouted as he charged the enemy lines. For our children, for the future, the Vexery garrison fell by nightfall. For the first time in 300 years, Nexer Prime was free. Commander Jack Morrison landed on the surface of New Geneva 1 week after the offensive began. The planet was still dead, its surface still covered in glass and ash. Nothing would grow here for centuries. But Jack had come anyway. He had a promise to keep. He walked through the ruins of what had once been the capital city. He passed the shadows of buildings, the outlines of streets, the places where millions of people had lived and worked and loved, all gone now. All reduced to nothing. Jack reached the center of the city and planted a flag in the scorched earth. It was a human flag, simple blue and white, with the symbol of Earth at its center. He stepped back and stood at attention, saluting the dead.
"We remember," he said quietly.
"We will always remember, and we have made them pay." He stood there for a long time, alone among the ghosts of New Geneva. The wind blew ash around his feet. The sun set slowly on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. When darkness fell, Jack returned to his ship. there was still work to do. The war was not over. The Vexery still had forces scattered across the galaxy, still had leaders who needed to answer for their crimes. But the hardest part was done. The enemy was broken. The tide had turned. Humanity had proven something to the galaxy. They had proven that they could not be destroyed. They had proven that they would fight back against any threat, no matter how powerful. They had proven that the massacre of their people would never be forgotten and never be forgiven. The Vexery had awakened. Something in humanity that should have stayed sleeping. Now they were paying the price, and the payment was far from complete. 1 year after the war began, last Vexery holdout surrendered. Their Grand Admiral, a being whose name translated to "He who commands stars," transmitted his surrender from the bridge of his flagship. His voice carried the weight of utter defeat. "We yield," he said. "We accept your terms. End this." Admiral Nathan Cole received the transmission at Earth Command. He was older now, worn down by months of constant war, but his eyes still held that same hard determination that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "Accepted," Nathan replied. "Your ships will power down and prepare for boarding. Your soldiers will lay down their weapons. Any resistance will be met with total destruction." There was no resistance. The Vexery Empire, which had stood for 10,000 years, collapsed in a matter of weeks. Their fleets were captured or destroyed. Their colonies were occupied. Their homeworld was under human control. Everything they had built was gone. The victory celebration on Earth lasted for 3 days. People danced in the streets. They wept and laughed and held each other. Fireworks lit the night sky over every major city. The human race had faced extinction and survived. They had faced an ancient evil and defeated it. They had paid a terrible price, but they had won. Nathan did not celebrate. He sat in his office and looked at the casualty reports. Billions dead in the initial massacre. Millions more lost in the war. So many names, so many faces, so many lives cut short. Victory felt hollow when measured against such loss. 1 month after the surrender, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on a neutral space station. Humans, Nexari, Talvani, Shrel, Gorvon, and a dozen other species that had suffered under Vexery rule came together for the first time. They came to discuss the future. Admiral Nathan Cole addressed the assembly. He looked out at the gathered beings, each one different, each one carrying their own history of pain and survival. The Vexery believed that the universe belonged to the strong, he said. They believed that power gave them the right to destroy anyone weaker than themselves. They ruled through fear and cruelty for 10,000 years. They murdered billions of innocent beings across 100 worlds. He paused, letting his words sink in. They were wrong. Strength without wisdom is merely cruelty. Power without compassion is simply evil. The Vexery thought they were the greatest species in the galaxy, but they understood nothing about what truly makes a civilization great. Nathan looked at the Nexery delegation, led by young Keth, who had become a leader of his people through the rebellion. Humanity did not fight this war for conquest. We did not seek to replace one empire with another. We fought because we had to, because the Vexery gave us no choice. But now that the fighting is over, we have a choice about what comes next. He spread his hands, including everyone in the gesture. We can build something new together. Not an empire, but an alliance. Not a hierarchy, but a partnership. We can create a galaxy where species work together as equals, where disputes are settled through negotiation instead of violence, where the strong protect the weak instead of preying upon them. The assembly was silent. Then Keth stood and spoke. The Nexari have been slaves for 300 years. We had forgotten what freedom felt like. We had forgotten how to hope. Then the humans came. They fought the masters. They showed us that resistance was possible. They gave us weapons and support when we rose up against our oppressors. He looked at Nathan with deep respect. The humans could have conquered us too. They had the power. But instead, they offered us partnership. They offered us freedom. For this, The Nexari will stand with humanity for as long as our species exists. One by one, other delegations rose to speak. The Talvone pledged their loyalty. The Shrell offered their technical skills. The Gorvin, who had hidden for centuries, emerged to join the new alliance. Each species had their own story of suffering, their own reasons for gratitude, their own hopes for the future. The Galactic Alliance was born that day. It was not perfect. It would face many challenges in the years to come. But it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose, not fear and domination. And that made all the difference. The Vexari were given a choice. They could join the Alliance as equals, accepting the new order and learning to live peacefully with their former victims. Or they could remain isolated, cut off from galactic society forever. Most Vexari chose to join. Over generations, they learned what their ancestors had never understood. They learned that cooperation was stronger than domination. They learned that other species had value and worth. They learned, slowly and painfully, how to be good neighbors instead of cruel masters. Some Vexari never accepted the new order. They lived in isolated communities, bitter and resentful, dreaming of past glories that would never return. But their children were curious about the wider galaxy. Their grandchildren were ashamed of what their ancestors had done. By the fourth generation, even these holdouts began to integrate into Alliance society. Dr. Linda Reyes retired from military service after the war. She had done what she set out to do. She had avenged her family. But the revenge brought no peace. The emptiness inside her remained. She returned to New Geneva, the dead world where nothing grew, where no one lived. She established a memorial there, a vast garden planted in soil brought from Earth. Each plant represented a life lost in the massacre. Flowers for the children, trees for the adults, vines for the families that had died together. She tended the garden herself, year after year. She watered the plants and pulled the weeds, and watched things grow where nothing had grown before. Slowly, over time, the silence of that dead world was softened by green and growing things. People came to visit the memorial. Survivors who had lost loved ones, soldiers who had fought in the war, even Vexari who wanted to understand what their species had done. Linda welcomed them all. She told them stories about the people who had died. She helped them plant new flowers in memory of their own losses. The garden became famous across the galaxy. It was called the Garden of Remembrance, and it stood as a testament to both the horror of the massacre and the resilience of the human spirit. Captain Derek Santos became the first human ambassador to the Nexari people. He spent the rest of his life building bridges between species, helping former slaves adapt to freedom, mediating disputes between Alliance members. He was not a soldier anymore. He was a diplomat, a peacemaker, a friend to all who needed one. Commander Jack Morrison returned to Earth after the war. He went back to the small town in the mountains where he had grown up. He married a woman named Katie, who had lost her brother in the massacre. Together, they raised 3 children and lived quietly. Far from the noise of galactic politics, Jack never spoke about the war unless someone asked. When they did, he answered honestly. He told them about the terror of watching New Geneva burn. He told them about the determination to make things right. He told them about the price of victory and the weight of survival. Sometimes, late at night, he would walk outside and look up at the stars. He would remember the friends he had lost, the battles he had fought, the terrible things he had seen and done. He would remember the Vexari, who had thought humans were weak and worthless. He would remember proving them wrong. The galaxy had learned a simple truth in those terrible years. Humanity was young, but humanity was strong. Humanity was small, but humanity was brave. Humanity could be hurt, but humanity could not be broken. Other species told stories about the humans. They warned their children never to underestimate the creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. They spoke of the massacre and the vengeance that followed. They spoke of a species that had risen from the ashes of extinction to reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity had been tested, and humanity had answered. They had become survivors. They had become avengers. They had become builders of a new order. They had become the species that stood between the weak and the strong. Protecting those who could not protect themselves, they had become something more than just another race among the stars. They had become legend.